Dear chess friends, chess is really a crazy game. We have seen really many crazy things like queen sacrifices, double rook sacrifice, decoys, deflections, crazy pawn breakthrough motifs, I don't know, X-ray attacks, and all of these beautiful elements that we love to see, of course, in a beautiful chess game. But one of the craziest games that I've seen in my life was the beautiful and immortal game played by Grigory Seper against Ioannis Nikolaidis, in which Grigory Seper, believe me or not, sacrificed every piece on the board. So he sacrificed 2 knights, 2 rooks, 2 bishops, and then afterwards the queen, just in order to have a beautiful promotion of the pawn. Be prepared. This is simply sick, brutal chess, simply chess from another dimension. So before we start to analyze the game, let's talk about our hero of today a little bit more. So Grigory Seper is a strong Uzbek grandmaster. He's the generation of Vasily Ivanchuk and Boris Gelfand in the World Youth Chess Championship in 1988. Grigory Seper finished respectively on the 3rd place, which is, I think, a beautiful result when you think about it harder, when you watch the careers of Vasily Ivanchuk and, for instance, Boris Gelfand. They're really the legends of the sport, and in such a competition, you finished on the 3rd place. In my opinion, Grigory Seper's career also deserves all of our respect. So let's see now the Grigory Seper Immortal. Put your seatbelts on, watch this beautiful and immortal game. So Grigory Seper with the white pieces, open with the move c4. We have here g6 by Ioannis Nikolaidis. We have e4, bishop to g7. After a couple more moves out of the English, opening the game transpose now into the King's Indian, here the standard King's Indian position. So in the game, knight to e2 was played by Grigory Seper. He's going into the so-called Kramer variation. He's trying to get the knight on g3 and then to launch the flank attack with the move h4, h5, continuing the pressure against the fianchetto setup of black. So in the game, knight from b2 d7. Now we have this idea, knight to g3, c6, bishop to e2, preparing again h4, h5, and now here Ioannis Nikolaidis played this queenside attack with the preparation a6 followed with b5, because this move makes, in my opinion, really sense, because in the beginning, of course, if white will attack the king side, probably white will then castle queen side. So that's why in this setup black wanted to be also fast. If for instance white castles early, then of course you want to be already there with this early b5 possibility. So in the game, bishop to e3. So here Grigory Seper continues simply with normal development. We have now h5, which is one of the good methods, I think, against the Kramer setup. I've played the King's Indian myself many times, and when I faced the Kramer variation of whites, I launched many times this control play idea with the move h5, because the knight is a little bit misplaced on g3. Whenever you see that your opponent has placed his knight on g3, b3, I recommend you that you attack it on the flanks, because you see the knight doesn't have good squares anymore. If, for instance, h4 happens, then of course white has to retreat here on f1, and then of course white cannot castle. White cannot secure the king by castling here on the king side at least. So in the game, f3 was played by Grigory Seper. Maybe a more aggressive way would have been here the move f4. This would be, I think, very interesting, because if black continues now with the normal plan, we just retreat, and now after move h3 we have even the possibility to play g4. And look at this now. I think this is a great position for white, especially because of the fact we will simply play g5, f5, e5. In some occasions is even a possibility. So in my opinion, this is not a pleasant game here for black for sure. So here Seper played the slightly passive line f3. This wasn't the best continuation by him, so probably f4 would have been better. But of course here black continues with the normal plan, now with the move b5. And now comes the first, in my opinion, really mistake by white. Here Grigory Seper played the move c5. It's a risky choice. It seems like a good idea, because you're locking here simply the queen side, and you're paralyzing a little bit here the structure on this side of the board. But actually after d takes c5 and d takes c5, okay, white has here now a space advantage on the queen side and has some strategic maybe advantages on this side of the board. But we have to say it, this is now an isolated pawn, and this pawn can be really vulnerable pawn. You cannot even protect it with b4, because then you're opening up the long diagonal for the dark square bishop. So that's why this method to play this space advantage with just this pawn is a little bit risky in my opinion. Now, in my opinion, also queenside castling doesn't make sense anymore, because if you do that, you already expose yourself, you already weakened your pawn structure in front of the king. So now I think the only side that makes sense is, I think, kingside castling here. Queenside castling is not an option here for white. So a little bit risky. Of course, nothing is lost, but in my opinion, this was now the first real mistake here by white, by Grigory Seper. So here in the game, queen to c7. Here black doesn't react correctly. Here I think black should have simply continued with this plan, h4. This is now the common idea of black's attack against the Kramer variation of the King's Indian. Here after move h4, the knight has to retreat, as I said, to f1. And now you have lost also the possibility to castle kingside. Of course, you can do it afterwards. You have to play knight to d2, and you will eventually castle kingside. But you have lost the tempo, and you know, in the beginning, time is everything. Time is really very valuable in such an early stage of the game. So now with the move knight to f1, look at this. Now queen to c7 we can play, queen to c2, and now we can play something like knight to h5, knight to f4, occupying simply here this weak square in f4. And even if you castle, as I said, on queen side, then we can finally get this knight into the game. Maybe afterwards we can also play ideas of knight to e6, and you see suddenly this pawn on c5 becomes a huge problem. But in the game after move d takes c5, here black didn't react correctly. As I said, h4 much stronger. H4 would be, I think, already not such a good continuation here for white. So in the game, Grigory Seper finally continued with kingside castling. Now h4 comes, but it's a different story. Now we can retreat with our knight on f1. We can reroute it to knight to h1. Now we can reroute it to f2, and then afterwards, maybe if possible, even to the square on g4. So in the game, we have now knight to h5. Simply trying to get this knight again on this beautiful square f4. Grigory Seper prevents this idea with this move queen to d2, and now comes the second mistake, I think, by black here. Black desperately wants to play now the move knight to f4 and play simply the move e5, but this move e5 is risky. This was really unnecessary. A better continuation would have been a very aggressive g5. G5 would have been really a beautiful move here by black, because look at this. Now if you pick up the pawn on g5, we can pick up this very important pawn on c5, and afterwards we'll play something like knight to e6, c5, c4, b4 here. You see the bishop is a little bit misplaced here, so in my opinion this was the way to go. Here black had again a chance to maybe take over in the game. This didn't happen. After move e5, you see you had your chance maybe to be aggressive here also on the king side, and now Grigory Seper simply continues with normal development. We have now the move knight to f2, we have now knight to f8, and this is now really the last mistake. So you see black basically made here 3 consecutive mistakes in the game, and now from this point on, put your seatbelt on. From this point on, the game becomes simply a one-way ticket in white's favor. So Grigory Seper played now the immortal attack with this idea. He played now the move a4. And whatever you do, it's already so messed up. Because even if you play bishop to b7, even if you try to play maybe a solid position here on the queen side, after a4 that Grigory Seper played, Nikolaidis played the move b4, simply continued attack against the knight. But after move a4, even if you play, as I said, bishop to b7, the problem is now white will simply continue with 8 takes b5, 8 takes b5, now even knight to b5 is an opportunity. Look at this, c takes b5, bishop to b5. Even if you cover yourself, then of course rook to a8 is going to happen. You cannot pick up here with the bishop. Even if you step back here maybe to e7, then we have c6 as an opportunity. So you're getting destroyed by this bishop's activity. So from this point on, as I said, the game is over. So after move a4, you see you don't have time to play the move bishop to b7. This position has to be understood now like this, because even this move is not helping out black. So that's why here Nikolaidis played the move b4, attack now the knight, and from this point on we have now the first sacrifice in the game. We have now the stunning knight to d5. Really wild stuff. So here Seper sacrificed his first piece. He sacrifices the knight, and basically there's nothing that can be done. The problem is now the b4 pawn is hanging. Even if you play something like queen to d7, then we can play knight to b6. Look at this. You maybe simplify the game a little bit by trading off the queens, but after bishop to d2, you have to step back. Look at this. Pawn on b4 weak, pawn on a6 is weak. We can pick up the bishop, then we pick up the pawn on a6. So again, I think the game should be over here for black. Even if you play, as we said, queen to b8, we will eventually pick up now just the weak pawn on b4. So after move knight to d5, here Nikolaidis is saying I'll accept the challenge because I don't have anything better. Here we have c takes d5, we have e takes d5, but now here Seper created two connected passers on the c and d file, and these pawns are mobile, these pawns are rolling, and they're creating really an annoying setup here against black's minor pieces. The main issue, I think, is here that you don't have a good square for the knight. You would love to play something like knight to d7 and castle. Probably, for instance, the engine now in this particular position suggests a wild line for black. It's not that this line is helping out black. Still, black should probably lose in the game. But after move knight to e6, maybe you can survive somehow this attack, because after f takes e6, bishop to e6, queen to b4, maybe, I'm not sure, maybe castling, maybe you can somehow hang on to this position. But as I said, in my opinion, this should also not work here for black. So after move e takes d5, that's why f5 was played by Nikolaidis. Now here Grigory Seper simply continued with the move d6, forcing the queen to retreat. And now after move queen to c6, here black is trying somehow to control the light squares. Of course, this pawn storm is simply annoying to handle. Now the queen is at least protecting the king. But now comes another stunner. Here we have another brilliant move here by Grigory Seper. He sacrificed now the second piece, bishop to b5. Comes, of course, with the dirty idea. You have to accept the challenge or you lose the queen, of course. So that's why after a takes b5, we have now a takes b5. We have queen to b5, and again, maybe not the best continuation here for black, but this other continuation is also not good, I think, for black. If you play queen to b7 instead of queen to b5, then of course c6 is going to happen. Now we have to play something like this, rook to a1. We will pick up the queen, so actually in this scenario you have to sacrifice the queen. Then after rook to f1, king to f1, maybe you can survive this position like this. But look at this, knight to d3, knight to c5, d7, queen to b4 is going to happen. This pawn is weak, bishop is coming into the game. You still need extra time to develop the knight. You need still extra time to secure the king by castling. So still, it's of course a messed up game here for black. So after move a takes b5, that's why here queen to b5 was played by Nikolaidis. Now we have rook takes a8, queen to c6, and now rook to a1. This other rook is now coming in a beautiful way into the game. So f4, you can guess the grip here. Of course, Grigory Seper is not reacting to this attack by the pawn on the bishop because it doesn't matter. Here, the pawns are rolling. The rook is active. This rook is coming into the game. The queen is active. So we should not really evaluate this position, which piece is really attacked. We should really evaluate which piece can we activate. And now the bishop on e3 here is basically out of game anyway. It's simply blocked out by its own pawn structure. So that's why here Grigory Seper plays the beautiful rook to a7. He's simply getting this other rook into the game, sacrifice simply the bishop. Even if you play f takes e3, the problem is now we will simply play like this, a rook to c8, queen to c8, and now rook to e7. You have to step back, queen to b4, and there's simply no good escape against queen to a5 or queen to b6. So the game is simply over here for black. So you see, with the move rook to a7, you wouldn't have time to pick up this lousy bishop here on e3. So that's why in the game knight to d7 was played by Nikolaidis, which really makes sense, bringing a new defender into the game and finally preparing kingside casting and securing the king, getting out of this mess, getting out of this monstrous attack by white. So now comes another stunner, rook to c8. Here, of course, Grigory Seper is not allowing black here to breathe, sacrifices the rook for the exchange. The queen has to take, and now queen to d5. Still, this bishop is loose here on e3. Look at this, really, really wild stuff. But now the queen is not allowing again the king to escape. Here again, black is simply stuck with the king in the center of the board. So in the game, f takes e3. So you see, Grigory Seper sacrificed now many pieces already, but still this is so bad. Look at this, the pawn pawns are rolling, so it's simply impossible to defend now this position for black. So in the game, queen to e6 attacking the king has to step back. We have now rook takes d7, really wild stuff, because after e takes f2, of course king to f1 was played by Grigory Seper, because of course he didn't want to play king takes f2, because after king to f2, the queen after queen to c5 comes with a beautiful check on f2, so that's why black will probably defend this position. So now after move king to f1, we have now queen to e8, and now comes another stunner, rook to f7, sacrificing another piece. So you see Grigory Seper sacrificed now the last rook, so he sacrificed already 2 knights, he sacrificed already 2 bishops, he sacrificed now the second rook. After rook to f7, we have queen to f7, but now the queen is coming into the game. You have to cover yourself, and now comes the stunning d7. Really wild stuff. Here, king to f7 had to be played. We have d takes e8 as a promotion, rook to e8, and now after a couple of checks, the rook is covering, but now c6, sacrificing even the queen. Here, if you take, of course, after c takes b7, both of these pieces cannot of course catch up anymore with the pawn, so it will be a promotion. So that's why after move c6 we have now the move e4. So you see here Nikolaidis is also trying to battle, is really trying to make something out of this position with the move e4. Here in the game we have now the move c7, e3, and now queen to d5. We have king to f6 now after a couple of checks, again queen to d5, and after king to f6, queen to d6, we have now king to f7, and now we have the queen sacrificed. The last piece is now sacrificed. Look at this, really wild stuff. After queen to e7, king to e7, c8, the promotion, and now here Nikolaidis tried to somehow spice up the game, because here after move queen to c5, king to e8, we have now a new check, king to d8, we have now a new check, we have now king to d7, after queen to g6, now comes a beautiful idea here also by Nikolaidis, because he tried now to trick here white, because if you play something like king takes e2, then you get the fork on f4. Of course, here Seper didn't fall for this. He played now king takes f2, bishop to e3. The last chance, of course, if you take the bishop, then we have the promotion again. But after king to e1, in this position, Nikolaidis resigned. So, really wild stuff. So you see, this was really crazy. 6 pieces were sacrificed, and then afterwards the queen. One of the most important games that I've seen in my life. So in my opinion, really one of the best games that I've seen for sure. So, okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. If you want to see immortal tactics like this, check out our best chess games of all time series, and also my commented chess games played by computers. They are really crazy, with some immortal tactics by Stockfish, Alpha Zero, Lila Zero, and many more. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.